Good morning. My name is Virginia Harrison, and this is,
My name is Gary Hahnemann.
and we're here representing Carroll Citizens for Racial Equality, and we're honoring one of our oldest members of our organization. And just to give you a little introduction, Gary and I are the senior members of Carroll Citizens for Racial Equality, and we're interviewing Fran Bartlett today. And Fran, what we would like for you to tell us is how you got involved with Carroll Citizens for Racial Equality and what brought you to the door.
I think it was an associate minister at our church, at the Westminster Methodist Church, who first told me about CCRE, and she took me to one of the first meetings, but then she moved, but I stayed. I've always been concerned about the differences. When I was growing up, we didn't go to school together. And just out the road from the high school in Mount Airy where I went was a little tiny building, which was all of the black children in elementary school came to that school. And that's now a restaurant. And in the restaurant, they have a history of kind of the background. It wasn't until much later that we went to school together.
What's the name of the restaurant? Do you remember?
Mount Airy.
Is it the Brick Bridge?
Yes.
Bridge?
Yes. And it's about a half mile or less from the Mount Airy High School. And of course, the black kids went there, and we went to the other school.
Was it something that happened in your childhood that you'd like to talk about?
I don't know. It was a very unspectacular childhood.
Well, if I remember correctly, did you have African American to come work with you?
Pardon?
To come to your house and do?
Oh yes, B came one day a week, and as my mother got older, B came and cleaned and ironed for us, and and we ate lunch together, and some people said, "What, you mean you sat down at the table with a black person and ate lunch?" I wouldn't have thought anything else. My mother wouldn't either.
Fran, you were you were a teacher.
Yes.
And you taught in Sykesville.
I taught in Mount Airy and Sykesville.
Okay. Would you like to talk about some experiences you had with the Methodist Church?
Well, let's see, Methodist Church, there were three parts. There was a Methodist Church South, the Methodist Episcopal Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church South, and the Methodist Episcopal Church. And in I should have brought my notes with me. I think it was about 1958, they joined into the United Methodist Church. But they were still divided because it was still blacks and whites. But then we didn't have that many blacks really in Maryland, but when the churches united, it brought in churches in West Virginia, and we had a number of blacks then, and but they were still divided. But then they decided to make them all one. They were all members of the United Methodist Church.
Did you have an opportunity at one time to go to Morgan State?
Yes, I went as a fraternal delegate representing the MYF. That was a Methodist Youth Fellowship. I was very active in it. We met every Sunday night. And I was on the conference council. The Methodist Church has various levels, the local and the district and then the conference. And one of my jobs was to attend, be a fraternal delegate for a week at Morgan. I was the only white person there, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. Had a wonderful, wonderful week.
How did you feel about being the only white person there?
I forgot I was white.
Oh.
I roomed with two sisters, and we talked late into the night, sometimes early in the morning, over our hopes and aspirations, and it was a very wonderful experience all the way around. I had one of the bishops taught the class that I took, and we had evening worship, and we had Vespers out on the hillside at Western Maryland. That goes back many years when I went to we called it summer camp, but it wasn't a camp, it was held at Western Maryland. And I can still see us sitting on the hillside just above the football stadium, above the football field, having a very wonderful Vespers led by someone who did a great job. I've forgotten her name. And but at that time it was a divided. We were only whites who attended then. But we had a dream that it would be united, and in time it was.
That's wonderful. You want to? I remember rather, that you spent some time in India.
Yes, I was a missionary for 3.5 years in India, and I was thinking about it the other day because we hear so much about Afghanistan now and Iraq, and I remember on the way home, a friend of mine, Nancy, who was in Pakistan the same time I was in India, decided to plan our own trip home, and we wanted to go into Iraq and cross over up to Beirut, and we weren't allowed. I wasn't allowed into Iraq. She was, but Iraq is a Muslim country, and I think because she had taught in Pakistan, which was created for the Muslims when India got her independence. Pakistan was kind of created for the Muslims, and because she had lived there and taught there, she was granted permission, but I wasn't. So we ended up flying. They couldn't cover the skies. and we ended up flying to Beirut on the way home.
Wow. So you got it from both ends.
Yeah.
And Fran, a few years ago when when you joined Carroll Citizens for Racial Equality, and Carroll Citizens for Racial Equality started the leadership conference with the Carroll County Public School, you were involved in the planning process and raising money. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't remember a great deal about it. I remember meeting at having a meeting in McDaniel Lounge at Western Maryland then, and planning the first interracial conference. It's all very vague in my mind now. I can't remember any of the details, but it was very interesting. There was one leader there who sang. She was a beautiful voice. And I remember her, and can't remember who else. Walt Michael was very involved in Common Ground. I remember attending that. And it was one of the first conferences, I think, I could be wrong, but I think it was one of the first conferences that included blacks and whites in the early, as it began, it always included both.
Yes, I think the first conference came out of South Carroll High School, and that's when we took 120 kids to New Windsor Service Center. Were you involved in that one?
I think so.
Right, that was the very first leadership conference that we had. And we were thinking, since it was such a great turnout, that we would try to get it in all of the school system. With your background and some of the things that you've done, how did you feel about that? How did you look at it, you know?
Well, I was for it, of course, and I remember one little girl saying, "You're always talking about African Americans. My mother wasn't African, and my grandmother wasn't African, and I'm not African. I am black, and I'm proud of it." She says, "Even though I'm really amber colored." I remember that at one of the conferences.
Anything else? Anything else that you remember? Excuse me.
I remember looking forward every summer to the week of Western Maryland. I think you would have to be 12 to be an MYF, and I went the year I was 12, and I went every summer after that. But that wasn't interracial.
It wasn't.
No, not then.
Fran, I'd like to ask you, when I'm listening to you and thinking about the years of knowing you, that there's a strong spiritual thread through a lot of your actions and your thinking as it relates to racial equality. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. You know, how you grew up with that spiritual orientation and how it carried you through your life in a lot of the work that you've done.
Well, I grew up in an active Methodist home. My father and mother were Methodists from way back, and my grandparents, I'm sure, were Methodists too. And so it was just kind of inborn in me that the Methodist Church was the church. Not to put down other churches, but that was the important one in my life.
Wasn't your husband a minister?
Yes, yes. We met one summer. The year after I came home from India, the mission board sent me to summer conferences. I spent a week at 6 different conferences, and that's where we met. He was on the staff at a conference in New England. I think it was, I can't remember the name of the conference now, but that was where we met. And he was just beginning to study for the ministry. So we had 8 years because he had college, and he hadn't intended to go to college, and he hadn't prepared for it. We had 4 years of college, and in seminary is usually 3 years, but it took him 4 years. And in that time, we adopted 3 children. And
Okay. Being a teacher and in Carroll County during the years that you taught, what was that like as far as racial equality was concerned?
well, the first years I taught, they were still divided. It was, 54, wasn't it, that the Congress passed.
The
Civil rights
law?
legislation.
Pardon?
Was it the civil rights legislation you're talking about? Was it the Civil Rights Act?
Yes.
That
yes.
was in 64. 50,
It was when?
54.
54. I
Brown
thought it was 54.
It was 54. Brown
And
was
and I was teaching then, and I was so glad to see. But the first year I only had 2 blacks in my. I was teaching middle school English, and I only had 2 blacks in the in that class. But gradually, a lot of blacks. Well, for one thing, living in Mount Airy, there was this little black school right outside of Mount Airy. But if you went to high school, you had to go to Westminster. Robert Moton was the only high school for blacks in Carroll County. And I used to feel sorry for the kids because they'd have to get up early in the morning, and getting up early in the morning wasn't a good idea to me. And ride the bus to Robert Moton, and then same thing in the evening. They'd get home maybe 5 o'clock, and I thought, what a shame, that they had to go through that when we had a school right there in Mount Airy.
Was it some other incidents you could probably, you'd like to talk about?
I can't think of any particular. Of course, going to India was my biggie, like before India and after India.
I have a question for Fran. You've become quite renowned in CCRE for your book reviews over the years
Oh.
in our newsletter, and I guess it fits right in with your teaching and English background,
Yes.
interest in literature.
Uh-huh.
But could you talk a little bit about your interest and your contribution in that regard?
Well, I wasn't sure how good a book reviewer I was, but I enjoyed doing it.
Well, we enjoyed reading them.
There's one book I've just finished reading called Journey Home. It's a story of a young man who lived in the South during the Civil War, and he wanted to return back home after he was discharged from the Army. And it's very interesting, the situations he faced as he returned home. And it's by Danielle Steele, who has written umpteen books.
So you're still at it.
Yeah.
Good for you.
One of my most interesting experiences, I think, was, as I look back, was not being allowed to go into Iraq. And Nancy, who taught in Lahore when I was in India, we decided to plan our trip home, and the mission board gave us the money that it would take to go directly home. And we planned our own trip home. And we got to Iraq. We were going to go to Iraq, up through Iraq, and into Beirut. We got there, and they wouldn't let us in. They would let Nancy in, but not me. And I think it was because, they said it was because I had missionary in my passport. I think it was because she had taught in a Muslim, in Pakistan was largely Muslim, was created for Muslims, and she had taught there, and I had taught in India. And but we wouldn't split up, so they couldn't govern the sky above us, so we finally flew. We flew from Pakistan, I guess, to Beirut.
Fran, did you have some other books that you read that you want to talk a little bit about?
I can't even think of them.
I know there's probably been so many over the years, but
Yes.
just one particular one that what touched you?
I can't think of one. I really can't.
Well, is it anything else you would like to share with us, or like maybe talk about your children?
I have 3 children. I had an ectopic pregnancy, if you know what that is. But anyway, we adopted Tim. Tim was, we adopted him at Christmas time. We said, here was our best Christmas present. And he was 3 then. He was 4 the next May. And he always enjoyed telling people that we were married in 55, and he was born 6 months later. But Tim is in Florida now, and my daughter Cindy and Judy were sisters, and were half sisters. They had the same mother. And Judy's in South Carolina, and Cindy lives near Washington, and she comes up. She's a massage therapist, and she comes up and gives me a massage every Monday, and that's nice. But it's nicer to see her than to get the massage. But that's kind of a byproduct of it.
Virginia, I'm wondering if any of Fran's friends that are here today might have a question or two for her. Would anybody have a question? Or?
Well, she has some wonderful grandchildren also, so she could tell about her grandchildren.
Oh yes, Cindy had twins. They're 12 years old now, and I have one great grandson. Tim married, but his marriage didn't work out, mainly because he was gay. He is gay, and he has a partner, and they've lived together for years, many years. But he has Jared is his son by when he was married, and let's see. As I said, Cindy has a twins, and Judy has one, Alex, who I took a lot of care of, and Alex was almost like my child, and and it seems impossible, but he's a junior in college now. Has always been an excellent student and made the dean's list. He's going to the Community College of South Carolina, expecting to transfer from there to Clemson. He wanted to go to Clemson, but Clemson was very expensive, and so he's doing taking that route. And apparently, I didn't know the difference, but it's called a state community college, which means that all of his credits every credit that he makes there, he is transferable. That he passes, of course, is transferable. And he made the dean's list the first semester he was at Clemson, so.
Fran, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your time in college, where you went.
Oh, I went to Western Maryland.
What was it like then? When did you graduate?
42. No, it was high school, 42, 48. And things I remember, every Sunday night, the principal of the college used to read poetry to us. We gathered in the McDaniel Lounge and sat around on the floor, and they'd have a fire, and he would read poetry to us. And I remember, what was it, one of the Ogden Ashes poems he used to do, and he said, and we requested over and over, we request him to read this one. And he said he felt like sometimes he should read it and then toss the book in the fireplace. But he never did. But, and I was on the basketball team all 4 years in college. And I loved basketball.
You still watching it? You watch now?
I don't watch much on TV. I don't watch sports on TV. I don't know. I would rather watch basketball than football because I never know what they're doing in football, except running it, tackling everybody. But I don't watch sports on TV.
I have a question for you. I'm really curious to find out about your involvement with the civil rights movement when you were a little bit younger, maybe after you graduated from college and you were teaching. What kind of involvement did you have with the civil rights movement in the 60s that led you to this wonderful place that you landed now?
I really don't know what involvement with civil rights. I remember not long ago they celebrated the 50th year of the March on Washington, and I remembered walking down beside the reflection pool, and Martin Luther King spoke from in front of the Lincoln Memorial. And even from that distance, you could hear every word he said. And I remember being very thrilled to be there for that.
That's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fran, you've lived in Westminster for a number of years now, am I correct? What are some of the changes you've seen?
I don't know if I'm aware of.
Changes that are going on?
No.
McDaniel's a lot different than it
Yes,
used to be.
it is. Right.
Was it a smaller, more intimate town, or?
Well, I wasn't involved with the town much. I mean, you know, we were at the college and Westminster was down the street.
So it was down in the valley, like, you couldn't go down in the valley.
But one thing with the college now, at one time the president had to be a Methodist minister. And now that's no longer true. I think Dr. Casey's a wonderful president. I've been very impressed by him.
When you were teaching in Sykesville, who was your principal? Who was some of the principals there?
Don Reck, who goes to our church in Westminster, so I see him. And Don Piles was the vice principal. And then when I moved to Sykesville, to teach in Sykesville, Don Piles was my principal. And I understand he's not well now. I don't know, but I've lost touch over the years.
Well, did you, Sykesville, was that the original Sykesville middle school, or was that the?
I get confused. I did my master's degree in secondary education. And I remember this. When I went to teach at Sykesville, 5th grade was an elementary school. And because I had my degree for secondary school. They wouldn't give me the pay scale. I was on $200 a year less. And then in the middle of the year, they created the middle school. And then it was considered along with high school. And they paid me my rest of my $200. I think I got $1,800 a year the first year I taught.
Really? Didn't at one time, didn't Sykesville Middle School catch on fire?
Yes, I wasn't there then.
Oh.
I think that was while I was in India, because when I came home, I went back to visit, and they had a fire during that time when I wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
Lord Hawkins was the principal when I taught there.
And you lived in, where did you live in Sykesville?
The first year, let's see, I went to see who was the superintendent of schools. Name some of them. Janice. And he thought I should teach English. And I said, because English was my major. But I like games. I like to play. And so he said, well, if you do that, you're going to have to teach in 2 schools. So the first year I taught, I lived in Mount Airy. I got up on Monday morning. I guess it was Monday morning. Got the train from Mount Airy to Sykesville. We had a train. Mount Airy had a very interesting train. It ran into Baltimore. It left at 5:30 in the morning. It took 2 hours to get to Baltimore. And in the train station, it had the Mount Airy accommodation and listed all these places because it stopped at every little town along the way. And I get the train at 6:30. It took 2 hours for it to get to Baltimore. And 6:37 or 8:30, that was a perfect timing for someone who worked in Baltimore from 9 to 5. It left Baltimore at 5:30, got to Mount Airy at 7:30. You see, it seems impossible now, but that was the way it was.
Yeah.
And so I'd get up on Wednesday morning. I taught 2 days in Mount Airy. And then I'd go up on Wednesday morning and get the train to Sykesville. And I had a room there with a very lovely lady, and then taught 3 days there. And then Friday afternoon, I'd get the train back to Mount Airy.
So you were still living with your parents at that time?
With my mother. My father had died.
Oh, where in Mount Airy?
Prospect Road. I've written an article about a tree that was very important in my life, because I used to climb up in that tree and sit there and read, or sometimes I'd just startle people as they walked underneath. As I spoke to them when they walked underneath. And I grew up there on Prospect Road, and my father, they moved into that house when they were married, and my father died in that house. So they hadn't moved. I used to say, I wish I'd like to move sometime, just to move. And then I married a Methodist minister, and we moved and moved and moved. So I got my wish.
And now you're living at Carroll Lutheran Village.
Right.
That's a big change for you?
It wasn't too much. Of course, I'd never owned a home. And so we bought a house on Pennsylvania Avenue. And I don't know, moving to Carroll Lutheran Village was like moving, well, just down the road. And it was a great change, because Carroll Lutheran Village is if you don't have a car, you have the shuttle. You have just all kinds of advantages to living there.
And you have lots of friends here?
Yes, yes, you make friends there.
Lots of book clubs?
No, just one.
But you've been quite active here, am I correct?
Fairly active.
Okay. Any more questions?
And my friend Mary, who's here today, we taught 5th grade together. Well, we were on different teams, but
You didn't say what motivated you to go to India to begin with, and what you taught there, and what you learned there. What was
Well-
what started it all?
I attended a youth conference in Cleveland, and I'd often thought about it, but I couldn't quite see giving my whole life. But they introduced a new program called the I-3 program, which was India for 3 years. Well, I thought 3 years, I can do that. And so I applied and was accepted. And I taught phys ed. Now, people can't understand a missionary teaching phys ed. It doesn't, but I think that's because people don't understand what a missionary really is. A missionary isn't to try to convert people. A missionary is to try to live with people and help them in any way they can. So when I went there, the principal of the college was a very, I asked someone if she was recently converted. You know, you always have this idea that, and they said, no, her parents were Christian before yours were. Because she had grown up in the Martoma Church. St. Thomas is supposed to have, well, I mean, he did. He went to Egypt first and started the Coptic Church, and then he went to South India and started what's called the Martoma Church after him. That's when he started the first churches. And but Sarah was a brilliant woman. She had 2 doctor's degrees, both from the United States, schools in the United States. And but she was handling the sports program. All the girls who lived on campus had to take games, they called it, 3 days a week. And she was doing it. So she was so glad to welcome me, who had training in phys ed. And, but we introduced the same sports to them, not Indian. We played softball and volleyball and all that. So.
We want to present a little something before we wrap up here.
Okay. You want
Okay.
to do the honors?
Okay. Well, Fran, before we wrap up here, we want to give you a little token of our appreciation
Oh, my
for
goodness.
the years that you've contributed to CCRE. And the trophy here is inscribed Miss Fran Bartlett, August 4th, 2014, lifelong member of Carroll Citizens for Racial Equality. We appreciate all of your hard work and dedication.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
And I really have to say that when Fran came and joined our group, it was, you can always depend on Fran. Fran was always on time, always coming, faithfully working with us in our meetings. And even when it got to a point that you were, it was harder for you to come, you put lights on your cane and you came.
Yes, I remember.
And then with your push cart that you have, you still came, and it was such a pleasure to work with you and have you be a part of Carroll Citizens for Racial Equality. And as far as we are concerned, you will always be a part of Carroll Citizens for Racial Equality, because just you being with us taught us a lot about life, the way you faced your challenges. You just kept moving, and that's what we look at as being winners. Just keep moving. And
Thank you.
It's been a phenomenal progress with you. You've really given us a lot, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. When I gave up my car, I gave up my freedom. I didn't realize, I knew I would, but I didn't realize how much it would be. And so I had no way to get to Food Sunday or to,
CCRE.
I had friends who would bring me, but you can't burden friends down with getting you places. So that was the main reason I gave up Food Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.